Hi, I'm Tom Creed. I'm a director, working about half in theatre and half in opera these days. I sometimes make festivals, though I'm not doing that now. And I am on the steering committee of the National Campaign for the Arts, and I'm doing quite a lot of that now.
Yes, for anyone watching this in the future, it's like a time capsule of the COVID-19. Might kind of call this the COVID-19 tapes, but it's we're kind of here on April the 20th. It's the year 2020. Tom, take me back to you young in Cork. Was it like, were you directing, your friends? Were you kind of, were you, was that kind of was theatre or kind of performance of that area in your blood, do you think, from an early age?
I don't know if it was in my blood. I studied music as a kid, so I did like grades in theory and the piano, and was never really interested enough in the piano to be any good at the piano. And then I kind of, I guess, as many people, the combination of a quite inspirational drama teacher at secondary school and youth theatre was my way in. And my father, who's an engineer and who taught in UCC for many years, but he was doing his master's in Galway the year Druid was set up.
Wow.
And saw the original Love to Castle McGuire with Marie Mullen and the original Playboy the Western World, and where Gary would like direct the show but also sell the tickets and also operate the lighting and also sell the sweets at the interval. And so I think he maybe had a kind of, I don't know, but a kind of idea that was something that I should do, and he was kind of encouraging about that. And so I guess kind of from when, I guess I kind of really, from about 15, I left music behind, and the theatre became something that I was really interested in. I think I had, like, my first appearance, I think, was when I was 4. I played some kind of a troll with a blue rope tail in primary school. But then the last couple of years of secondary school, and I had a kind of the year I did my leaving cert, I had 2 like super formative experiences in the theatre. My father brought us to see the Druid production of The Beauty Queen of Leanan on tour at the Everyman, and I was knocked over by it. And not long afterwards, we were brought by school, my leaving cert class, to see the original production of Disco Pigs.
Oh, wow.
With Cillian Murphy and Eileen Walsh. When it came back, so it was not the very, very first time, but it had already been a bit of a success. And the theatre, and then it was like, the theatre, this is a thing. Like, this is like a thing. I want to do this. And I was in youth theatre at that time, and I was doing it in school. And I ended up studying arts in Cork. I had sort of thought about doing the theatre course at Trinity, but I kind of also, there were kind of a whole bunch of people who'd done kind of quite well from Cork, who had done art degrees in Cork, people like Fiona Shaw and John Crowley. And I sort of thought, like, maybe if studying philosophy and English at UCC was something that worked for them, that might work for me as well. And so that was that. And then I think like most people who were interested in the theatre at that stage, I thought I was going to be an actor. Like, that's sort of what you do. And then kind of quite quickly, a kind of combination of like me not really being cast in things and me kind of being kind of frustrated by directors in things, made me think a little bit about directing. And so I directed some plays in my second year in college. And as soon as I did it, it was like, I almost couldn't imagine doing anything else in the whole world.
Okay.
And so I directed a production of a tiny play by Edward Albee called The Sandbox, which is like a 12-minute play, in the first term of my second year at UCC. And then in the spring, I directed a play called Equus by Peter Schaffer. And both of those productions were invited to ISDA, the Irish Student Drama Festival, which is being held in UCD. And I was, I guess, lucky enough to win the Best Production Award and the Best Director Award and a bunch of design awards. and uh, and kind of also, that is the, met a bunch of people who were on the judging panel, like Lachlan Deegan, who I've ended up working with for my whole life, Karen Fricker, who was editing Irish Theatre magazine at the time, Ali Curran, who was running the Fringe. All these people were on the judging panel, so I kind of uh, yeah, I guess that was the kind of maybe the first link into Dublin theatre. And I guess it's worth also saying that I kind of, from quite early on, I was conscious that Cork was small. So I grew up in Cork City, or in Cork, just outside the city, and then we moved into the city, and went to school there, and went to university there. But I was kind of conscious that Cork was small, and from a quite, and it was a super exciting time in Cork. So Corkadurka were really at the height of their powers, with Disco Pigs, and then the original production of Mr. Man, the Trial of Jesus on Patrick's Hill. It was kind of a super exciting time, and also the prospect of the capital of culture in 2005 was kind of on the horizon. So I went to university in 1998, and I graduated in 2001. But so it was sort of super exciting. But I was always kind of didn't want my context or my ambition or my understanding of what the theatre was to be constrained by what was available in Cork. Mm-hmm. So, from, I guess, in my college years, I would go and see things in Dublin at the Fringe and the Theatre Festival. And towards the end of my time in college, I had friends who started getting into acting courses in London, so I could go and stay with them. And the opportunity to bring a couple of forgettable student shows to the Edinburgh Festival, but really giving me an opportunity to be at the Edinburgh Festival and, really to see the kind of work that was happening at the International Festival as much as in the Fringe. So this idea of kind of always trying to have a broader perspective of kind of what the theatre could be, I guess, was something that was always there for me from quite an early stage.
And take me back then to Cork in the beginning, and just a question in relation to the music. Like, was music in your head? Like, was it kind of a natural thing that you would do? The piano, was kind of music a thing in your family? Was there?
No, not really. I think it was a thing it was more like a thing that you sent your children to do. And at a certain point, I was not so much interested in music in the classical tradition at all. And I was listening to a lot of music, like a lot of pop music and rock and roll and, kind of a lot of music. But I kind of, the idea of kind of music in the classical tradition certainly was something that I sort of left behind and then gradually started to come back to later. And I guess we can talk a bit about my work in opera, which somehow connected to that.
And in relation to, say, the when you're in secondary school and when you're kind of, getting involved in youth theatre, was there a lot of kind of your peers kind of getting involved in that scene, or was it kind of something separate? Was it kind of in your school, or was it just something separate, completely to your life, that kind of whole youth theatre vibe?
No, it was quite separate. It was sort of, and I mean, the theatre was something that I did in school, but then the youth theatre was something that I did with other people, and then the college people were other people, so that it was sort of, and so then, like, out of college, started making work with the people who were around in college, and some people I've continued to work with, so Siobhan McSweeney, the actress who we now see in Derry Girls, would have been at college at the same time, a writer called Linda Radley, who I worked with a lot. Kind of, it was an interesting time. And in Cork, and I think kind of we were a generation who were kind of on the wave of Corkadurka, so that we were seeing all of Enda's plays and Pat's productions, and the theatre was kind of so also kind of entwined with the kind of dance music scene and the music scene and all these music festivals that were happening, and there was a kind of I guess a kind of a tension in Cork, and we'd grown up, I guess, with the kind of, like, it was, I guess I would have been at the kind of end of Sir Henry's, but the mythology of Sir Henry's and that nightclubbing scene and kind of all different kinds of music, you were kind of there. But that the theatre, I think at that moment the theatre was something that there was a generation of us that were excited by this being a thing that you could actually do, and people like us did this in Cork. And so out of college, I set up a company called Playgroup with some colleagues, and we did a bunch of things. We did a few plays that were plays. We did a bunch of new things. And I guess the first thing that was kind of the kind of, I guess the next moment for us was a show called Soap that we did, which was a soap. And it was 4 actors doing 10 episodes of a soap over the course of a fortnight, which we did first at Cork Midsummer Festival, and then we were invited to Dublin Fringe. And it was a kind of, idea of making, it was kind of like all the soaps, so the Australian soaps and Fair City and Corrie and all the soaps kind of crashed in together, and 4 actors playing all the parts and live music. And I remember when we were at Dublin Fringe, it was the kind of thing where like all the staff of the theatre festival would come on their lunch break to come and watch the show, and Peter Crawley reviewed the whole thing for Irish Theatre Magazine, which was kind of mind-blowing for us then, and then we continued doing that. There was soap, and then there was a project called Dark Week, where I guess I'd sort of started seeing some of the early Punch Drunk shows in London, so this kind of immersive theatre. And so in 2005, where we were thinking about obviously the capital of culture and the heritage of Cork City, we made this show where we used the whole building of the Everyman, and we used 50 actors, and the audience could go wherever they wanted. And then a year later, we made a show called The Train Show, which was a show where the audience took the train to Cove for 25 minutes, and the show happened on the train. People got on at performers got on at different stations. So I guess it was kind of doing things that looked like plays, but then also doing some things that didn't look like plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess kind of, I guess it was sort of like the kind of a little bit like being in the gym and kind of working things out and going, like, what are the things that I'm interested in terms of like how I work with the actors and how you work with space. And then that all kind of was happening at the same time as my starting to become part of Rough Magic. And so doing the Seeds program, being part of the Seeds program in 2004 and 2005, which was the first time they took on directors. So previously the first cycle of the Seeds program was just 6 playwrights. And a couple of people who I knew very well, like Ray Scannell, who I've continued to work with forever, and Una Carney, who's now mostly making films. But the Seeds program was something that we kind of looked to because I knew some people who'd done it as playwrighs. And then became part of that first group of the Seeds program, and really then started to think about international theatre and getting to travel to Germany and to Hungary and to sort of see a kind of directing that I hadn't seen before, where the work was coming out of, on the one hand, a kind of really close dramaturgical reading of the piece,
mm-hmm.
but then also a kind of really personal response from the director, and like really putting what they thought about the piece and what the piece taught, what made them think about the world, and really putting that on the stage. And so that idea of kind of, I guess having kind of sort of come out of a new writing idea, where the idea is, the kind of idea of the director as a midwife in this kind of, British Royal Court kind of new writing idea, but then also kind of, for me, really this idea of directing as kind of having an idea about really what you want the theatre to be like, and using the play as a kind of a way of doing that in a way. And so, and then, so I was on the Seeds program, and then, I was very lucky in that, I had the kind of opportunity that most young directors now don't have, which is that, in 2006, where there was more funding around than there is now almost. Rough Magic, Lynn and Lachlan were able to offer me a job as an associate director of Rough Magic. And so at 26, I had a job and a part-time salary with the company, and had the opportunity to direct properly resourced productions with some of the best actors in Ireland. And so kind of the second half of my 20s then I was sort of spent doing that, and also doing kind of productions on the Fringe and doing productions with independent companies. But kind of having the opportunity that I think is sadly lacking for directors in their 20s now, to really have the opportunity to work with design and with the best actors and with resources, which kind of I saw entirely dry up during the recession.
And Tom, just in relation to that, and going back into kind of what you found, you just talk a bit kind of about when you even kind of when you started directing in grade school and college. But what was it that you kind of found you went, oh, was it a feeling? Was it like what was it about it that kind of made you feel at home about being a director?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The I guess I felt like there was something that happened where I think where I could help. I could look at what the actors were doing and kind of help them to be more detailed or be more accurate. But I think that, but also there was something kind of subliminal and kind of emotional, and the idea of kind of getting to know myself better by working with these fictional characters and with space and with yeah, there's something about that the idea that yeah, something that I hadn't quite thought about before, but that there was a way of me putting something of myself into the work.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of I've, you know, and my ideas about what acting and staging should be like have you know, have developed, and they've kind of gone through kind of different phases. But I guess but kind of right from the beginning, I guess there were a couple of things. One of which was a kind of uncompromising approach to truth. So kind of always going after the truth. And also that the theatre would be absolutely something that is now. So, you know, the idea of doing something in historical costume, or, you know, that you know, was something that I was never interested in. You know, that the idea that the theatre was always about somehow being about contemporary life, and not only the stage aesthetics, but also the kind of that the acting should feel like contemporary life, and that we you know, I guess as a generation that had grown up with television and then with the internet, but something about how to make this feel to feel like it's now, yeah, so that there's something. And I guess the thing about the truth on that is about that there's this thing there's something happens to us when we're watching the theatre, so that we're the performance is about making something happen in the audience, and there's something that's absolutely happening in the room between all of us, and it's kind of magic, and maybe that's the thing. And of course, you know, as you go on, you kind of come up with strategies to do that and to make that happen, and you keep digging. But there was something maybe about that at the beginning, which was like this being in the room with actors and then being in the theatre and putting these other things together around it is kind of magic, like kind of making something that wasn't there before, and then that will also be gone.
Yeah. And talk to me then about, you know, I mean, you've had a, you know, a hugely successful and varied career, and I'm interested in the you mentioned obviously, you know, growing up in Cork, that kind of extraordinary local piece about, and the pride in the Cork piece of it, and then the great internationalism in your kind of work and outlook. And I think I'm always fascinated by that, because I think in some ways the more local you become, or the more local aesthetic you have, that actually lends itself to a way more international aesthetic, because you're open to different truths and different kind of settings. Has that always been with you, Tom, that and kind of exploration of world theatre?
Yeah, I think so. And like when I started directing at Rough Magic, mostly what I directed for Rough Magic was contemporary international plays, often in translation. So the first thing I did was a Norwegian play by Jon Fosse, kind of the great sort of Norwegian Harold Pinter, whose work was not known here. A play by Martin Krim called Attempts on Her Life, which had never had a professional production here, which was a kind of play that for me really blew up the idea of what the theatre could be. And yeah, all kind of looking abroad also for kind of I suppose where, you know, initially particularly in Germany, where I saw a kind of real questioning of what the theatre could be, but in the context of drama. So actually what I've always made is drama. You know, I'm on some you know, in some ways I feel like actually what I do is very conventional. You know, and the and I guess I kind of, for the last, I guess, 10 years, maybe 10 years or more, I've kind of really been developing a kind of quite specific methodology in terms of working with actors on drama, which is basically a version of what some Russians invented at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, which I initially came into contact with through doing some workshops with the director Katie Mitchell, the English director, who kind of was really looking at this kind of process and going, how do you use something that is fundamentally based on psychological realism and research and very detailed work on the text to make something which is very spontaneous and can be abstract as well as being very concrete. So there's something about learning that from seeing, directors like Thomas Ostermeyer and Falk Richter at the Schaubühne in Berlin initially. Katie Mitchell a lot of the work in the early 2000s in London, which for me was a kind of revelation, her productions of Chekhov and this kind of work, and the very early work that she did with videos, so the production of Waves by Virginia Woolf, which then came from the National Theatre to the Dublin Theatre Festival. And actually getting to see also some of that work in Dublin. Like I think I think there's a generation who have come after me that didn't realize that actually there was a period where we had some brilliant international directors working at the Abbey, and like those seasons where Calixto Bieto directed Barbaric Comedies, which was like bananas. But to see Irish actors doing that kind of material with those kind of aesthetics, Medea with Fiona Shaw, Katie Mitchell's production of Iphigenia at Aulis, Laszlo Marton's production of The Wild Duck. So those productions in the kind of early to mid 2000s were actually, I was kind of thrilled by the idea of international theatre aesthetics with brilliant Irish acting.
Yeah, and I think Tom actually those 4 productions, I think actually that's where I met you first. There was a workshop after with Laszlo Marton on The Wild Duck.
Yeah, of course.
But I just think there's those productions in particular, and there's a few more besides. But I think you're right about those international aesthetics, international directors working with Irish actors were just a phenomenal kind of grenade, thrown into the whole gene pool of the scene for, and that kind of, because those productions really do stand out for me for many different reasons, but also in relation to the role of the director in them. I remember kind of being in the room with yourself and Laszlo Marton, him talking about the amount of years he had the blessing of training. He was like, I think the whole table nearly fell down going, what? Sorry, what? And
particularly, the thing I always remember about that is the idea that, like, in those kind of Central and Eastern European theatre cultures that do a version of Stanislavski in a way, like, you mostly had to do the acting course, the whole acting course, before you did the directing course. And actually the idea of, and I suppose, for me, the idea of drama as a form that we don't take for granted. I think there's a kind of a way in I'll use the term the Anglo theatre, so I mean the kind of Irish and British and American theatre, and they're a little bit different, but where there's a kind of idea of what drama acting looks like, and it's kind of nearly naturalistic, and it's kind of often turned a little bit out so you can see it properly, and it's often like lit just a little bit better than normal so that you can see everybody and hear everybody properly, and it's a little bit enunciated more clearly than people would say in real life so you can hear them all properly. But I think that there are things that we kind of grow up in those theatre cultures where we take just what acting is as a thing that's for granted, and then you find the play, you learn who the characters are, you do the staging around it. But for me, there was something about those European directors who actually weren't taking the idea of what acting is for granted. And you should go, like, particularly if you're doing something that is realistic or naturalistic, it's a style. And actually you have to take the detail of that style as seriously as if you were doing viewpoints or mime or, like, actually what is the thought like, what is the gesture like, and being super detailed about that. And I guess for me the kind of revelation that I found through Katie Mitchell and through reading about Stanislavski and all that work was to work with improvisation. And so I kind of now mostly, when I'm directing things that are dramatic, so that they're not not something that's in verse, and opera is slightly different, but I do the whole rehearsal process through improvisation. The actors do a very detailed, we do a very detailed work on the text, and we work out all of the things that kind of underpin the scene, the characters' backstories, the characters' relationships, the events in the scenes, the time of day, the weather, kind of all of these things. And then we basically stage the play as a series of improvisations. And the actors never work on stage with their scripts in their hands. And eventually we start doing the words that are in the play, but kind of only when we're ready to do them. And so in a way, I guess I was sort of finding a way of going, what if you approach the text from inarticulacy rather than what a lot of acting is you got the text and it's a thing, and then you sort of try and make it like real life. What if you started with something that was much more messy and inarticulate, and eventually the actors like just barely get to the point of doing the text, but that they're always speaking it and moving it with the quality of an improvisation. And I found a kind of renewed interest in kind of dramatic theatre actually through finding a way of working like that, and a way of kind of a kind of method of approaching the work and thinking about the work and talking about the work where actually it naturally became a little bit messier and a little bit more, for me, more real, I guess. Mm-hmm. And in a way, with a lot of the work that I do, I try and go after it that way.
And Tom, just the question I always ask directors is how are you on kind of that kind of letting go process, like when it gets to moving into a theatre or opening night, or how do you find that within yourself, emotionally or physically or psychologically, in relation to giving the play away?
So it's funny, I don't kind of, so I've got better at like not being nervous and holding my nerve until like really late. But then like usually it's kind of when I'm coming to the theatre for the opening night, I need to like hold on to people and try to not throw up into my hands. Yeah. And I do, like, if I could watch all the shows, I'd watch all the shows.
Okay.
I don't always give notes. I often don't give notes. And actually for me, one of the reasons I always watch the shows is because watching the shows is a way for me to get to know my own directing.
Okay.
And, you know, I think there's a certain kind of theatre where I think actually on some level it can only remain good if the director is there often and is giving notes all the time. But for me, there's something about making a process, and the work with improvisation is also about this. It's about making kind of conditions where that actually almost everything that the actors can do, as long as they're being truthful to the text and to the characters and to the situation, is the right thing. Yeah, so that actually that there's room for the actors to kind of be spontaneous within something that we really rehearsed. And so for me, you know, the idea that a show would run for a number of weeks and me not always see it, I'm kind of cool with that. And I also discovered, like, through, you know, talking to everyone, that the show is way better when I'm not there. But for me, there's something about it. I really like to watch my own work just to like see, to kind of look at my own decisions and to look at like how do you do a rehearsal process where the work is able to stay fresh without you having to continue keeping it fresh. And so it's funny, like I give the work away to the audience kind of immediately, but I stay with it. A lot of it has to do with getting to know my own directing and how to do the process better the next time. And also because, of course, on some level, you know, you work with so many people and it's sort of super collegiate, but also directing is the loneliest thing in the world, you know? And for me, that there's something about not wanting to let go of, not the play, but actually the experience that we've had over the making of it.
Yeah,
you know?
That's really interesting. That never kind of occurred to me before. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That feeling of the rehearsal room, the collegiality, and the play, as in playing.
Yeah, and like going on tour with things, and you know, and also, and it's funny with the operas, I've directed a couple of shows now for Irish National Opera and previously for Opera Theatre Company, which toured around the country to kind of a whole different bunch of venues. And as much as possible, I try to go to the venues, not so that I help with like making sure a certain light that has to be in a different place kind of looks right, or, helping them focus the video cameras or whatever, something. But actually, a lot of it also is also to do with like sitting in the room and what does it feel like to sit with this audience in Letterkenny, experiencing this kind of weird modern production of an 18th century opera with video cameras that we've made, and what does and I spend a lot of time I think at my own productions watching the audience as well and kind of watching their attention. I guess I'm kind of interested in directing in a way. A lot of it is about managing the attention of the audience in the end. Where do you want them to look? I love work where the audience is leaning forward, and where they're holding their breath, and I'm interested in kind of being in the room with the audience and going, oh yeah, that happened there. Yeah. What did we do there that that happened there? And it could be it could be the way a light works with a piece of music, or it could be the way that the rhythm of something happens, or the way you use silence, or how long do you hold the lighting at the end of the scene until you do the blackout, and at what speed do you do the blackout, and all of those things which are like working on and with the audience's attention. So I'm kind of super interested in so I learn about my work sitting in audiences with it. And like I can't, I guess because I'm so conscious of the audience and the work is so much about making something that happens with the audience, I kind of don't understand why I would stop watching it after the opening. And the opening is only the beginning of something, the theatre is just it's a series of beginnings. You begin the rehearsal and then you move into another room which has lighting, and then an audience comes in, and that's the beginning of another process of getting to know it. And then you get to the point where you're not rehearsing every day, but you're still getting to know it, and I like being around also so that kind of if the actors have questions, or, so the actors can continue to push themselves, or the opera singers, and find new things, and me kind of being around so that we can talk about that if we need to, but actually not so much to kind of impose into the process. For me, a lot of the way I work is about giving the performers the kind of autonomy to really be able to go out and do the piece. But of course, we've made like loads of decisions, and sometimes like really big ones that kind of actually then give the context for what the performers are doing.
Talk to me, you mentioned a couple of times there about the kind of journey into opera or into that world. I mean, was that something that was kind of happening you're interested in, or was it happen by coincidence or default, or how did that happen for you?
I mean, basically it happened from my starting to go to see opera productions by theatre directors that I admired. And, some of the directors that I've mentioned before. But that, occasionally I'd be in, and particularly being in London, to see, if I was in London to visit friends or to see something that was on at the Royal Court, there was the opportunity to see a work by Deborah Warner or Katie Mitchell or Richard Jones, often at English National Opera. I suppose I was always interested in those opera houses where the idea of opera as theatre, or opera as music theatre, was the kind of the philosophy. And I think maybe some of the best productions I've ever seen have been in opera, and like many of the not best productions I've ever seen have also been opera. But for me, there's something about all of these elements coming together, and the kind of the power of music to help us experience feeling and ideas, and all of these things together. There's a potential for a very intense, very concentrated experience, which is emotional, but also can really have ideas. And I guess I started to, see in opera, where of course there's a lot of very traditional opera, but actually there's also really a kind of tradition of opera being a form in which directors can really be authors and can really say something about the piece, because actually many opera audiences, many opera audiences have, seen Tosca so many times. And so you don't need to tell them the story for the first time. So there was something about starting to see opera that way, and then I guess really becoming interested in doing it and sort of going after that in a way. So taking some courses in writing I'm working on new opera and existing opera, and I did a little bit of assistant directing in opera just to kind of get a sense of how the process was at Welsh National Opera in Cardiff, and then you had the opportunity to direct some student productions at the Royal Irish Academy of Music. So to start to get to know how to work with music and how to be in the room with it, and got to be part of an initiative called Opera Hub, which was a kind of sort of like a seeds program that Opera Theatre Company had, and got to do some small productions for them. And then, more recently I've been working with Irish National Opera, but also because I've directed so many new plays, that I've had the opportunity also to direct new operas. So, and because of all of the music that I did and kind of really get left behind, in my teens, but I know my way around a score, and I can be very detailed with the music. So I'm not a singer, and you wouldn't want to hear me singing it, but I can kind of, I know what the shapes on the page are doing. And so I guess the thing that allows me to do is to be really detailed with opera singers about what the music is doing, in the same way that I like to be really detailed with actors about what the text is doing. Because of course in opera, so much of the emotion and the rhythm and the feeling are in the music more than in the words. And so there's, so that you can, for me, there's something really exciting happens when you're able to work with an opera singer and actually talk to them about why they're singing quickly, or why they're repeating, or why they're, why the music is doing this thing, and being really psychological about it, and really making the rhythm of the staging based on that. And, what happens if you do something very slow while the music is very fast? Or, I've directed some 18th century Baroque operas where there's a lot of repetition. But I'm super interested in going why is that person saying that thing 8 times? And how do you make it fresh and spontaneous, and, make something which I guess people have grown up with feeling is artificial, has all of the spontaneity of kind of theatre, the best theatre, or film, or so I guess, I've kind of and I found myself now in a kind of point where I'm lucky to do both. I get to spend about half of my life directing opera and half of my life directing theatre, and also letting those two things inform each other.
Well, that's an interesting place, actually. That kind of because from what the thread I'm kind of seeing from what you've been speaking about is that aliveness. And I think for me, I spent some time many years ago kind of assisting with Opera Ireland for a couple of years, and just that sense of the mechanics of it. I remember one day being in the factory rehearsal room, and there's just a piano and the whole 40, chorus, and you're kind of going, Jesus Christ, the absolutely the minutiae of what was going on, and yet the epic scale of it too. I say that must be so invigorating to be able to bring that musical analysis back to the forefront of your kind of being now, and being able to go in there and have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, it's intoxicating as well. Being in a room with opera singers singing next to you is completely intoxicating. And but also, for me, the score gives you so much information that I don't find it limiting at all. Actually, it's there's so much information. There's all of these words and music and drama, and you can do so much with it. You don't have to take them for granted, And I guess and I guess maybe the opera work that I do is kind of known for that, which is about going, how do we make a point now in our lives now where we can look at this old thing and make something that looks like the present, and what kind of a contemporary world would make sense for this to happen, So as an example, I directed a few years ago an opera called Isis and Galatea by Handel. which is a small opera, and it's about nymphs and shepherds in the countryside. And the shepherd Acis comes back from his travels, and he falls in love with the nymph Galatea, and the giant is cross, and he throws a rock at Acis, and he dies. And Galatea is sad, and she weeps, and her tears turn her dead lover into a fountain. And for me, I was kind of going, so how do you make this kind of fairy tale be like real life? And that's what I think about, like the countryside. And I think about this small community of people in the countryside. And lately, my experience of the countryside is kind of a small village in East Offaly, where my boyfriend is from. And so I kind of imagine, what kind of a context might you make there, where there's this small community and a homecoming and a love rivalry and a tragic act of violence. And you sort of realize then that actually it's like Tom Murphy's Conversations on a Homecoming with the ending of A Whistle in the Dark. And then working with the designer to kind of end up with a pub, a rural pub, which is a place for this community to live, and Galatea is behind the bar, and Acis has come back from a gap year, and the opera opens with the nymphs and shepherds coming in from the fields and kind of singing and dancing. And so what if it was on the line dancing night, where they all get together and they do line dancing, and it's in 4/4 time, so it's the same as the Baroque dancing, and then suddenly you're making this world which looks like a play, but is infused with this music from the 18th century. And so that you're looking at these two things are happening together. And because the singers know that kind of a world, they're able to act the characters like they're human characters now and be really truthful. And you kind of find ways of making the metaphors literal, or making something literal into a metaphor. And it has Big Tom and Philomena Begley up on the wall. And so for me, there's something about these multiple layers of our understanding, where we're watching this work from the 19th century, which is itself, or from the 18th century, which is itself an adaptation of a classical myth. And we're watching it from now through an idea of what I think about when I think about the countryside, so that all of these layers can make this thing that's very rich. And kind of, and for me, there's something about the opera where that possibility I find really exciting.
And I won't keep much longer, but I just wanted to see, what is it then that you bring from that world to theatre? I mean, you said they both have an influence each other. Can you see any influences on your continuing work in theatre, Tom?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first thing is, right, opera singers are amazingly well prepared. It is expected that opera singers come to rehearsals with all of the music learned and having rehearsed it really well. And so it means basically on the first day of rehearsals, you can start staging the piece with people moving around with the props and furniture in their hands. And in a way, the way I work with improvisation in the theatre has come out of the way I get to work with opera singers. So I don't ever want to see anyone holding a script, and in a way, because actually actors don't get paid enough, and often people are going from gig to gig, I don't, I like actors to come to rehearsals knowing something well, but I don't expect people to be off book either at the beginning of rehearsals. They can learn that over the rehearsals. But I found a way of working where actually the actors are kind of empowered to work with their whole bodies on drama from a very early point in the rehearsal process. And so I guess that's one thing. And then also, I think often in opera, the rehearsal times are shorter. And actually, I've realized that I think as a director, it is your responsibility to come into the room knowing the piece better than anybody else, and with a pretty good idea of how you would do every moment of the piece, if nobody has any better ideas in the process. Yeah? And so that you can always make something happen. And I guess I would have come, again, much more from a kind of Anglo way of making theatre, which is let's all get in a room and work it out together, and discuss what it means and all that. And more and more I found, if I come in with a bunch of ideas, we're already running the piece at the end of the second week of rehearsals. That's where you get to discover things. like working out why you come in the door the first time. Like, just come in the door and then find out what happens in the scene. And so for me, there's something about actually making everything happen, trying to make lots more happen much earlier in the rehearsal process. So then you have time to actually make it good and detailed. And, you know, I once saw a video of the painter Hughie O'Donoghue painting a kind of like sped up film, and it's just like layer after layer after layer after layer after layer going on the canvas. And for me, like, the quicker you put the first layer of the work down, the more layers you can put in. Mm-hmm. And so for me, there's something about being, it doesn't mean that the process is not completely open to every single possible idea that anyone might have in the room, and every single possible way that it might go, apart from the fact that you've probably designed the set already and, you know, worked out a bunch of things with the designer. But I think there's something about knowing the piece super well so that you can also help people be really detailed with it, and get the work happening really fast, but also come with a super open mind and a super curious mind, and a kind of and I guess in all of the work, whether it's theatre or opera, and whether it's an old work or a new work, that all we're doing is making something that could only be made now, here, by the people who are here.
Yeah.
You know, and whether it's an old work by Handel or a brand new play that you're staging for the first time, that you always bring the same values.
Yeah.
You always bring the same desire for clarity and spontaneity and being in the here and now, but also that it's not definitive, because it's over and then someone else can take the piece. In a way, also, it's why I don't have a problem with kind of, particularly with older work, of giving it a good shake, because it'll still survive. You know, like, you can cut things, and like, the play is still there, and the next person who comes and does the play can have another idea about the play, you know, but that this thing that, and in a way, maybe this is when you asked me about kind of directing and just, you know, what was it, the thing that I kind of discovered when I started doing it. And I think it's this, which is, we are here now, and we're going to make something together with ourselves and with our knowledge of the world and with the materials that we have and with the ideas that we have about the theatre. And it's only going to be all that we can come up with now. And that's enough, you know? And then you do the next thing. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to leave you with one question. And this is not an opening question, because it'll be a whole other video interview. You mentioned at the beginning kind of, you know, your growing role in the area of advocacy as well, and kind of, you know, the campaign for the arts. I'm interested in the relationship of, say, the arts and the artists to the public, and the arts and the artists then to the government. And I suppose the crisis that we're in at the moment has unveiled an awful lot about kind of the inner mechanisms or workings of society on a lot of different levels. But I'm just saying, you know, why was getting involved in advocacy a kind of a natural step for you, do you think?
I guess, you know, I guess I've always been interested in politics in a way, not capital P politics, but, you know, and I guess all of the things I've said about the work, and about the work coming absolutely about our understanding of the world, and in a way, I was going to, you know, I moved to Dublin because that I felt like I had done what I could in Cork, and, you know, so the conditions around the work are really important, and I think we need to fight for the best conditions to make the best work that we can, and you know, along with you know, many of our other colleagues in the arts, like, we really believe fundamentally in the value of what we do in society. And more than that, we can see it, you know, and you know, even in these strange days where everyone's at home, everyone's consuming all this culture, and you know, it's you know, it's inspiration, and it's consolation, and it's distraction, and it's sort of all of these things, and I guess I learned who I was through being able to have a life in the arts. And I know so many people who have been able to do that. And not only people who are working in the arts, you know, but the idea of I think the arts gives the possibility of another way of things being. You know, that's actually like the whole thing about making theater or painting or music is that things can be another way, and you can make things in the world. And I think often the you know, the resistance that you come up against is that people think that there is a way, this is what it is like, and we don't want to be encouraging people to be deviating from this. So you know, but I think, you know, it's been interesting following a lot of kind of discourse around education lately. And, you know, for ages we were hearing about STEM, about science and technology and engineering and mathematics. But actually now everyone's talking about STEAM and putting A for the arts into the middle of it. It's because, you know, that's where creativity, that's where independent thought, that's where, you know, the idea of possibility comes into our reality, actually, you know. And I think if we believe it, then we have to fight for it. And in a way, I had kind of orbited around a little bit around the NCFA, but then around 2016, when at that moment where the department was, you know, was going to be rolled in with all these other areas of government, and, you know, it really felt like this government was not going to take culture seriously. And I think along with some other people, then I went, actually, no, look, it's important that actually, you know, not that I don't just give out about this, but actually I try and help, you know, doing something about this. And I find it really kind of nourishing and energizing, and also frustrating, and, you know, kind of all of those things. But for me, there's something about, also it keeps me kind of, that part of the work that I do keeps me kind of connected into the world, and into kind of you know, that I'm super interested in politics, and often the work has kind of politics in it, and, you know, and but I think it is our responsibility to try and create the conditions under which we want to work. And actually that's old socialism, of course, you know, like that's but actually it's that we create the conditions as a society that we want to work in, so that it's not only about, this is what I want and this is my path that I'm on, but actually we're a society. And, you know, you know, it was interesting thinking about the initiative that the Arts Council have recently announced, the kind of fund to make work online during the crisis. And, you know, a lot of people have been very critical of that scheme. I've been one of those people. A lot of people have also applied for it. And of course, that kind of idea of making work at home on your own is a really sort of, you know, if you're a poet or a songwriter, then, you know, this can be beneficial for you. But I don't have opera singers and an orchestra and stage managers and designers in the apartment. You know, that the work I make is absolutely in a society, and I think that in terms of just having a hand in trying to argue for the conditions and the society in which you work is really important.
Okay, Tom, thanks very, very much for taking part in this. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and look forward to seeing you when we're all out of our enforced confinement, hopefully soon.
Yeah, absolutely. You too.
All right, Tom. Thanks a million.
Thank you.